Hello and welcome to today's episode of Pro Landscaper TV. We're here every Tuesday at 10 a.m. for around 40 minutes to discuss some of the hottest topics in the landscaping industry. Last week, Jim had an in-depth conversation with Barley's Chief Executive, Wayne Grills, and you can catch up with that episode and all previous episodes on our YouTube channel. Whilst you're there, please do subscribe to the channel so you can stay on top of all things Pro Landscaper TV, and please do like any of the videos that you enjoyed by clicking the thumbs up button on the video. So before we move on to today's episode, I just wanted to let you know that we have some upcoming episodes on the horizon. So next week, Jim Wilkinson is joined by Howard Gray of Green Blue Urban. Howard and Jim will talk about a range of topics involving the Sussex-based business delving into the past 20 years of its soil cell solution. And in 2 weeks' time, Pro Landscaper's head of sales is joined by Hester McQueen of Custom Build Homes, Danielle Thorpe of Brett Landscaping, and Hannah Jepp of ID Verdi. The panel will be discussing marketing techniques and tips in the landscaping sector. Now it's time to move on to today's episode, and I'm delighted to be joined by Ben West of Landscaping Solutions, Romy Rawlings of Vestre, and Darren Daley of Ground Control. Welcome. If I can just ask you all to say a little brief introduction, so a little bit about yourselves and your company. Romy, starting with you.
Okay, keep it brief. I still am kind of a landscape architect. I'm commercial director for Vestre here in the UK, and we are a Norwegian manufacturer of outdoor furniture.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben West. My company is Landscaping Solutions, and we are a domestic landscape contractor working in Surrey, Sussex, Hampshire, with a particular emphasis on naturalistic gardens, and we design, build and maintain.
Thank you very much. Darren.
Hey there, I'm Darren Daley. I'm the Director of Client Services at Ground Control. We're UK's leading largest grounds maintenance and winter maintenance supplier, as well as landscape construction and many other facets we support our customers with.
Thank you very much. Today we talk a lot on climate change, about what we need to do and the problems that we have. And the difference, I suppose, in today's episode is that we're going to be talking about what the industry has done and celebrating its achievements. Sorry. So the first one we're going to kick off by asking is exactly that. So what has the industry done so far to tackle climate change, and what initiatives have been introduced? Romy, did you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think it's a bit sporadic. I think in some ways everybody is so much more aware of the issues. Climate emergency was declared at the Landscape Institute a couple of years ago now, and the CPD on climate change is becoming compulsory now, 5 hours a year. So, there are all sorts of initiatives, I think, at fairly high levels that are prodding people to do more. And, we're really sort of getting into a position where I don't think anybody is unaware of the issues. Practically, though, I think if you sort of look at bottom up, I'm not so sure that it's where we need it to be. Of course, there's a big fixation now on recycled materials, which I don't think is always the right thing to do. On sourcing local materials, on transport, on electric vehicles and tools, perhaps, but it is patchy. I don't know that many companies, and I'm not talking about the ones that are here today, but that many companies that actually have an all-embracing coverage of the things that we need to do. And I feel in all honesty that we're going to need more legislation to really shove us along more quickly. There's a lot of talk and a lot of knowledge now, I think, but I just don't see the actions that we really need to see now.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think, well, hopefully Ben and Darren will say what their companies have done and how they differ from that particular approach. Ben?
Can I just ask Romy, you just said there about some situations where recycled materials are not more desirable than, say, freshly made materials. Which situations are those?
I think, you've got to look at every single material very carefully and scrutinise the whole life cycle assessment, because sometimes the transport of those materials or what it requires to recycle them properly and fully actually can involve more energy or more fuels. You know, I think to just say recycled content is great is not always the case, or it might be that you end up with a poorer quality material which doesn't last as long, so actually you're chucking it out after 10 years instead of 50. You know, I think we are a bit fixated on things like embodied carbon, not whole life carbon, and recycled is always good, and it's clearly not if you look at some of the data. Something like steel, for example, mild steel.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting. I think for me, I'm always interested in making the sustainable and the more biodiverse aspirational, and I think that the industry has made steps towards doing that. In particularly, I'm thinking, I think there's categories in the SGD awards. I think there's category. I think RHS has had a particular bent towards that in recent years. Barley's introduced some award categories that has, well, we got one last year that was for recycled and reclaimed materials. I think there's one that they've introduced from this year that's to do with biodiversity, perhaps inspired by the net gain principle that's been brought in. So in that sense, and Romy's mentioned the Landscape Institute, I think in that sense there's been progress made, recognition, awareness, and starting to make that aspirational. I'd like to see more prescription. I'd like to see the unification through the various bodies, and I'd like to see them prescribing more about what we should do, because smaller contractors, possibly larger contractors, you know, there's a lot of pressures on us. There's a lot of time constraints, all kinds of mixed messages. You know, I wasn't aware of what Romy's just said about steel. So it'd be nice to have some unified guidance from the from all the sort of industry bodies, so that we understand exactly what we should be doing, and perhaps legislation brought in that pushes us towards making the right decisions. I'd like to see more of that coming in, because just one glance at social media, I've become a recent convert to social media in the past 12 months, and one glance at it and you can see there's so many, Romy talked about from the bottom up, there's so many companies doing stuff and proudly displaying stuff that is patently, obviously bad for certainly for wildlife. I mean, you just see them taking sort of maybe overgrown plots and then turning them into just sterile, plastic filled, hard landscape filled wildernesses. And there's got to be a move away from that somehow. We've got to stop that, because it's really dangerous, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also like to add Pro Landscaper Business Awards to the list with our Sustainable Company of the Year.
Sorry, yes, of
Sorry.
course.
Darren, what about from a really, you know, massive company perspective? I mean, Ground Control has just achieved net zero. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what they've done so far? Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. I think we need to really use business as a force for good. So we've got to, I mean, I deal with customers every day, and lots of customers are grappling with what to do here. They just don't know. And I think we've got to be much more creative about taking that agenda to our customers. We've got to look for ways of showing them the way. Look, you know, what direction do you go in? What are you trying to achieve? How do you do it? How do you get your procurement within the customer aligned to what they're trying to achieve with their environmental agenda? And I think there's quite a fragmentation between those two things. They're very rarely aligned. So I think we need to look for ways to show our industry and our customers that operate within it that, you know, there are ways for us to support you with what you're trying to achieve in your environmental agenda, but we've got to come up with those solutions. And I don't think as an industry we've done anywhere near enough yet to make that happen. you know, and I think we've got a responsibility to lead the way ourselves. So it's all well and good preaching about, you know, what you should do as a customer, but it's also about us showing, look, this is what can be done. And Ground Control, I think, are leading the way in the market here and in the industry to say, look, this is what good looks like. We've kind of put our money where our mouth is, and we've put 5% of all our net profits into the Evergreen Fund. And that fund is used to invest into sustainable initiatives that have a positive impact on the environment, and put seed investment into those companies that are trying to make a difference that otherwise, without that seed investment, they just wouldn't have it. It's things like, you know, we've got an ambition to plant 1 million trees by 2025, and this last growing season alone, we planted over 48,000. And we're well on our way to achieving that. But it's, you know, we've got trees, we want to plant trees, but we're looking for people to partner with us that have got the land to plant those trees. So how can we kind of create, again, a good marriage there where we can work together for good? We're out there acquiring our own land now, 25 hectares we've just acquired over 7 locations in the UK where we're planting trees over the next few years. So, and that's not just in the UK. We've also bought some land overseas as well to make sure that we can really spread the impact that we have there. Again, yeah, as certified by the Carbon Trust just recently, we've become carbon neutral as of the beginning of the year. So again, we are really showing the industry this is what you can do. And it's not just about what's in your immediate line of sight, it's how can you have that positive influence further. So an example of what we're doing is moving all of our handheld tools to battery powered, as well as moving our ice fleet to battery powered a fleet of vehicles. And it's offering that out to not only to our employees, but the families of our employees as well. So you can amplify what we're trying to achieve even further and get even more internal combustion engines off the road. So I really think we've got a real strong responsibility to lead the way and model the art of the possible as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ground Control is doing so much in this area. It's really leading the field.
Can I ask about, sometimes we get fixated with tree planting. And it, in many ways, it's not the panacea that the general public, you know, the masses think it is. Carbon offsetting, planting, you know, it's an easy soundbite, planting trees. But what? Tell us more about that sort of tree planting side of things, Darren. Is that about carbon offsetting, or is it something more? Because I know there's a lot of people in conservation that are concerned that if you plant trees willy-nilly, you can degrade habitats. So I think there's a conversation to be had here about where you plant trees and, you know, how you manage them, what kind of trees you plant, and that kind of thing. I just wondered what your Ground Control thinks about that.
It's a very good point I think you raised there, and it isn't about just willy-nilly planting stuff and not properly measuring the impacts of the environment around you. But the trees that we're planting over those 7 locations, one internationally, is that should sequester 10,000 tons of carbon emissions over the next 50 years. So whilst that's good, it isn't the be all and end all, you're right, and there's many other things that we're doing around biodiversity. And we've got an ecology department that we've built over the last couple of years that's working hard with our customers to show them other ways that they can have a positive impact on the environment. So I just don't think one thing in isolation is the kind of the magic bullet. It's about joining up lots of different initiatives, but also being able to measure the impact that you have on that initiative, but also the broader impacts that might have as well. So it isn't the be all and end all, right?
Because Sorry, Romy, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's also not about, you know, as you say, trees being a panacea for whatever it is you're still doing. You know, that's the detrimental part of offsetting. You can't just carry on business as usual and just plant more trees. You know, I mean, the whole whether they survive, whether they're the right species, where they are, that's almost irrelevant. You know, you have to be driving down your impact and mitigating as little as possible, or it's completely pointless.
Yeah,
absolutely. And also there's better carbon sinks out there than trees. I think you've got grasslands, shallow seas, possibly peat bogs. If you do going overseas, I'm not saying this is what anybody in ground control did, but if you're going overseas and planting on tundra, for example, you know, which has been done in the past, and we've done it in our upland peat bogs and moorlands, you're actually damaging an environment which is a better carbon sink than a woodland potentially. So it needs consideration, that kind of approach. And as Romy says, there's a bit of a danger with we've got to be careful of greenwashing, haven't we? You know, because carbon offsetting is, as you point out, just tree planting is it's kind of, it allows a get out of jail card. I know big oil companies are doing it, you know, and airlines are doing it, and it's a way of kind of saying, shifting responsibility away from actually stop digging this stuff out of the ground. Let's keep it where we need it, and not kind of just throw money at it elsewhere. We've just got to be aware of that. Government are talking about it as well, aren't they? You know, this was just before the last election, the last general election. Everybody's trying to outdo each other on the number of trees that we're going to plant. I think we need to keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, I don't think, again, Ben, as I said earlier, I don't think it's you know, there's not a silver bullet here that's gonna solve the problem. I think it's a joined up set of initiatives that lend themselves to the same overall goal that I think is the solution here. So tree planting is one, if done properly and if well thought out and understanding the proper impacts of what you're doing, absolutely. But it's things like what the United Nations are trying to do at the moment with their 30 by 30. I think it's those kind of initiatives as well, where you've got, you know, countries signing up to say, look, by 2030 we would like to free up 30% of our land, whether that be privately owned or managed by the UK, for biodiversity. It's the initiatives like that as well that will really help drive that. And again, ground control helping, supporting, as well as, you know, others in this forum to make that possible and show people how to do it and how it works in practice as well.
Well, I think if you say, for example, you talked about buying land there, and I think that's a really good thing. And actually, you don't necessarily need to plant trees as they've done at NEP and various other rewilding schemes. You can actually let nature take its own course, and that can actually, in that dynamism that comes out of that sort of letting nature take its course, with maybe putting herbivores on there and, you know, disrupting the ground a little bit, you can actually achieve more than just, you know, planting a load of trees yourself in plastic sheeting, and you know you've got all that extra plastic that's potentially in the environment as well. So I'm really interested in that idea of buying bits of land and setting them aside and watching natural processes take place. I think that's really, really effective. Yeah,
it's a really good point to raise about tree planting there, because we certainly see a lot of targets from government, from companies, and also the supply and demand aspect of that as well. Romy, from a supplier's perspective then, I mean, what is your company doing to be more sustainable? Because it kind of tends to lead the way.
I hope so, yeah. I don't think there's any aspect of our business that doesn't focus on sustainability throughout literally everything. So we've been carbon neutral for over 10 years now. And Darren mentioned earlier, you know, that does involve third-party accreditations, the Carbon Trust or whoever. This is done in Norway. But it is important to get verification of those sorts of aspects. We've embedded 9 of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals into our business strategy for the last probably 4 or 5 years now, I think. We donate 10% of our profits to sustainable projects and charities in the countries we work in, but also globally. So through the United Nations, again, educating children in areas of conflict. I mean, there's a huge, vast variation. I'll put a link to our About Us page if anybody wants to find out more. And then in day-to-day business, our production is completely carbon neutral. We use only 100% renewable energy. That's why we still only manufacture in Scandinavia. Although, you know, we get asked about local production here. And again, there's a bit of a fixation on, you know, isn't it better to produce locally? Not necessarily, no, not when we can enjoy 100% green energy and, you know, aspects like that. And as I mentioned with things like steel, we have a real focus on every single material we use. So we don't ever use timber from tropical, hardwood timber from tropical forests. We just don't believe it's ethically right, whether it's FSC or not. We only use Scandinavian materials. Our steel is Nordic steel because it has a 30% lower carbon footprint than the global average. And that's only about 20% recycled because it means we have extremely high quality by not using more recycled materials. Aluminium, on the other hand, the aluminium we use is again only Norwegian, and that's up at about 80% recycled content. So you have to understand every single detail of every single material and know what you're doing and why, and we're minimizing our impact throughout everything. And I think probably greater than everything now, and our real focus is on the whole life cycle of everything that we manufacture. So we have a Vision Zero now, which means that anything we put out is designed to last forever. Our steel carries a lifetime warranty against rust, and we will now, as IKEA are doing, take back furniture, refurbish it completely, send it all again out as new. And that might seem crazy and a hell of a lot of work to do that, but it's saving still about 70% of resources. So we don't want to manufacture something that ends up in landfill in 5 years' time. You know, the whole point now is about minimizing resource use, the circular economy, and our absolute focus is on that. The factory that we're now building has a line that will only take back furniture, refurbish it and send it out. So it's a huge move for the future. And I think that we need to think about more than anything else, you know, minimizing I mean, it's, you know, it's been around for a while, minimizing reusing, but that circular economy is absolutely key. We shouldn't be dredging out more stuff, whatever it is, and then throwing it out ever at any point in its life cycle.
I mean, it's certainly a long list of
yeah, sorry. Yeah. I'll stop there.
No, it's great to hear more about. No, but Ben, what do you look for from your suppliers? What questions are you asking, and is that answering them, I suppose? Yeah,
well, as I say, there's a couple of things we've got on our radar that we look out for. So we talked about greenwashing. I think there's a lot of that about at the moment. So we look out for that. And I've noticed quite a few companies lately sort of jumping on the bandwagon, perhaps companies that I don't know, a year or two ago were selling plastic plants, and now we're sort of talking about their eco credentials. So I think you've got to be careful of that kind of stuff. But what we tend to do is we'll align ourselves with suppliers and work with designers, hopefully, that share our values. So we've got an environmental awareness process that we go through, and we developed this with Richard Gardner from NAG Solutions. He helped us with it, and it's about sort of, it comes in at the design process, so it kind of goes hand in hand with the CDM type of work, and it enables us to make design decisions based on the kind of areas that we believe we should be working towards. So we talked about recycled materials, permeable surfaces, reducing cement, creating more sort of habitats and using plants for pollinators, composting, water courses, all the types of features we'd like to see in gardens that are going to combat the problems that we face. And so that enables us to have a very clear vision of what we want to do, but also the kind of things that we're expecting from suppliers. We might ask them about whether things have got to be in so much packaging. We might ask them if we can get deliveries loose. You know, these kind of sort of basic nuts and bolts. And we'll be looking at asking for advice on, although this is very difficult to get this kind of information. And this is maybe where some of the industry bodies could do some studies and prescribe a bit more. I was talking about earlier is, for example, if we want to make a decision about paving, how do we know what is going to be the best paving to use in a particular situation that's going to have the least environmental impact? So we'll ask questions to suppliers about that. But at the moment, I think it's really tricky to get. I don't know if anybody else faces that. I mean, there's no other, I don't know about Darren, but it's difficult to get really clear, straight answers because these are complicated questions. Have you found that, Darren?
They are complicated questions, and sometimes the answers are not succinct enough. And as you say, there can be, you know, you can drive a bus through some of the answers as well when you do get them back. So, I mean, for me, it's you said something at the top of that response, which struck a chord with me, which is kind of working with suppliers that believe what you believe. You know, and Ground Control's core purpose is caring for our environment. You know, it's from all of our logos, and it's, you know, it's not just a strap line, it's kind of our true north in how we operate. So it's when we procure and when we look at our supply chain, it's, you know, is that coming through in the same way? Do they genuinely believe what we believe, and can that stand up under scrutiny? So some of the things we're looking to do is encourage our customers as well to think and operate in this way, is move our handheld tools to battery powered, you know, and which companies are out there offering really good products to do that,
yeah,
that are leading the way. Things like, again, commercial vehicles, turning all of our commercial vehicles. In fact, we've been signed up to the EV 100, which is a group of like-minded companies with large fleets. We've got 350 vehicles in our fleet to turn them to battery powered by 2030. So it's people that have generally not just saying this stuff and not just doing it to kind of score points, but actually believe what they're putting out there that are going to make the difference. And it's forums like this as well, where you can start to share and talk and share ideas and listen to other views and opinions that will inform the way that we make our decisions in the supply chain. We've just been recognised in the Thames River project as for, you know, which are thinking about the biodiversity and the impacts around the Thames River as one of the estuary visionaries, Ground Control is. So, you know, it's those kind of things where you can collaborate and think about what is the best solution that's going to give the best outcome by way of the environment, and also that shouldn't compromise quality and performance of the end product as well. But those two things can go hand in hand.
I think it's important to ask these questions, Nina, you know, because the more people that do, the more likely the suppliers are to switch on to the commercial side of it and make changes. I mean, we've been talking, how long have we been talking about the use of peat to nurseries? How long have we been talking about you know, pots, plastic pots and recycled pots? Things we got to keep banging on the door, otherwise things aren't going to change. They're aware of these issues, but things seem to take a long time to change, don't they? But I think the weight of more and more people asking these questions and making demands is we're going to see that change.
But I think that comes back to cost, and there's a comment in the chat about this, and we find it more and more. You have to have a view of whole life carbon, whole life cost, because if you look at only capital, you know, the cost of buying that plant in a peat substrate in a plastic pot, it's going to be lower than an alternative that we all know is better. But if it's 10% more or 20% more, won't stand for it. The industry at the moment just is driving price down so much most of the time that they're just, with value engineering, certainly in our world, there just isn't the scope to do the right thing every single time. And that does, unfortunately, obviously come down from clients often. It may well be the same in the domestic world. I suspect it probably is. And you have to be paying the true price of these things. You know, it's like having a very cheap Ryanair or whoever others are available, you know, flight, 30 quid return to Rome or something. You know that there's something wrong with that. You know, it's the same thing. You know, we're just driven by price. And I don't think these things change as quickly as they need to. Probably because of that as much as anything. The technology is out there, the knowledge is out there, the products are out there, but will your client or whoever it is you're talking to actually put their money where their mouth is?
Yeah, I think you're dead right. I think it is about mobilizing business to understand it's not, you know, how can we move the conversation or the decision making more into the focus of value?
Yes, exactly.
Value is returned as opposed to the cost, and they're two different things. So, you know, but it's these kind of things again. I mean, we're working with Cambridge University at the moment. We've commissioned them to do a report for us on how best we can get that message across and out there. You know, why are CEOs of huge companies putting out environmental objectives that don't marry up with the way that they're procuring? How can we change that dynamic, and how can we make a difference there? Because it shouldn't come down to cost, and maybe that's something we've got to look into. You know, if we can make these things more cost effective and show the great value, then it becomes a no-brainer, and that's how you create a movement and make a change.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, you're right, Ben, the information on most suppliers is not available. We've published EPD's, environmental product declarations, for every single one of our products this year. So you can look at the embodied carbon, you can look at the energy that was required to manufacture that. We know that none of our competitors in our sector have that information. So is that of value to a landscape architect? I mean, what that allows them to do is look through our portfolio and decide which of these hundreds of different seats you might want to specify, but they can't go to a competitor and say, well, how does yours stack up? And until that information is available, as you say, across paving, across furniture, across plant production, across every single aspect, fencing you're talking about, you know, you don't, as a specifier or a contractor or a procurer or anybody in this sector, have the knowledge that you really need to be able to directly compare properly whole life, you know, whole life carbon.
Yeah. So is this an area that maybe we could call on industry bodies, we could call on Pro Landscaper to promote? I mean, there's a grey area there, isn't there? Why should we be promoting? The question might be, why should we promoting one company over another? Have we got an obligation to promote companies that are looking after the future of our planet and our children? You know,
I think we all have to, you know, we've talked about business leading and showing the way, and we're all here doing exactly that. We all know what we want to do, what we should be doing. You know, we talk about a very small Norwegian company changing the world a bit at a time every day. And if we don't do it and show that it is possible and show that kind of leadership, then it won't happen. And it's not about being held up on a pedestal and, oh, look at what they're doing, it's incredible. It is about bringing everybody else along, making everyone question, you know, anybody in this supply chain question, ask the difficult questions, put everybody else on the spot and say, well, why not? And why don't you know? Why isn't that information available? It won't change otherwise. There's no point having a few, you know, brilliant people charging off into the distance. That's not what this is all about at all.
This is where I think the sorry, Neil, this is where I think the aspirational thing is a real key to sort of oiling the wheels of this up. Is you know, publications like Pro Landscaper, companies like Barley, the SGD. We need them to, and they're doing it. They're starting to do it, but we need them to kind of put the foot down on that one and promote the kind of schemes that we know are going to do the job we need them to do.
Absolutely. And I think it has to be collaborative in that way. It has to be an industry, a cross-industry initiative. And we really do need that information. I think we've been aware of that for some time. And again, third-party verified, you know, all through the same process. The Green Guide for Specification started that years ago, but only ever really covered a couple of things, paving. We need it to take that sort of approach, maybe with the BRE on board, and really publish this sort of information as soon as possible, I think.
There are certain factions that have, I found Becca Duncan and Rachel Bailey did a series of webinars over the winter that drew all these strands together. And I found that very helpful. It would be nice to see the governing bodies, the industry bodies, to be doing more of that kind of stuff. Maybe in a more sort of united front. But that covered every possible kind of sustainability and biodiversity question from all kinds of different angles. Brought in the carbon calculator to my awareness. And I thought that was a really useful set of webinars. Took quite a lot away from that. So thank you to Rachel if she's and Becca if they're listening. Really good.
Rachel might be, to be honest. Romy, have you noticed more clients asking for the green credentials of your products?
Yes. I mean, it's becoming quite common. It's sort of started with FSC, I guess, and, you know, ensuring that certification was available, and you know, when anything was delivered, that kind of information is there, or it would be turned away. It's about the knowledge, I think, and companies that now, instead of CSR, it's ESG. You know, companies are demanding more. But we also find, in all honesty, an awful lot of the time, when push comes to shove and value engineering takes place, then the commercial aspects will outweigh the technical or the environmental or the quality almost every time. You know, it's sad but true. And even ones that start out, it must be this, it must be that. You know, it must, you know, we could almost be specifying by carbon content now. It just doesn't carry through, and it comes down to price and value engineering again and again and again. And there is always going to be somebody cheaper than us. We don't set out to be the cheapest ever. So yeah, sadly, again, it's talking the talk and not following through.
So they're asking the questions, but not necessarily buying the products.
Yeah, you think, oh, you know, they get it. Not necessarily enough, or they don't care enough, you know. Yeah.
I think I couldn't agree more on that, and it is a big challenge, isn't it? You know, when we're tendering for business, you know, massive organisations, and it's normally in the tender process. You know, what are your green credentials? What are you doing? How are you doing it? And there's, you know, you have to. We're very strong on that ground control, very, very strong, and I think we can stand up to our commitments as well, more than stand up to and lead the way. But when I loop back round after winning contracts, it's often a case of, look, how much impact did that have on the overall decision? And I've often been perplexed that, yeah, it was fantastic what you did, but actually the overall decision making on the outcome, it played very little part in it. And I appreciate the honesty, but we've got to change that. And I think it is being creative with our solutions, standing by what we're saying, not doing this greenwash stuff that Ben was talking about and referring to, making sure that people are honest with their commitments and what they're doing. But that does need to be underpinned by robust government legislation and an international movement to hold people to account. Because it's all well and good businesses saying they want to do X, Y, and Z, but when their actions and behaviours are very different, it makes it even harder to sell the value in making what I believe to be the obvious choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, as I said way back, you know, we need more legislation. It's just not going to happen. The will is not there the way we see it.
Yeah.
What I suppose has the government implemented that is a positive step? So, for instance, biodiversity, net gain.
Well, I mean, that can be toothless, though, can't it? You know, I mean, if you look at you've only got to look at HS2 for 2 minutes. You know? It just doesn't stand up, does it? You know, on one side you've got the PM coming out and saying that we want this country to be a fantastic green, lead the way in green economics, and set the example for halting the crashing wildlife numbers. And then on the other hand, you've got you know, them clearing woodlands and the bird nesting season. Anyone that follows that is and also coming out and saying we want to build back better, and we want to stop, I think the phrase was, the nuke counters from holding back development. So it's mixed messages. I can't think of, yeah, the biodiversity net gain, but I mean the way that the HS2 ecologists, you know, it's very loose. I think if there's enough money for a development to go ahead, I don't think it matters how much, what an ecologist says, or whether there's you know, this net gain or not. I think it's a system that can be easily twisted. So it probably needs more teeth. I don't know. Do we know enough about that one yet? I'm not sure.
Yeah, interesting. Darren, do you think the same about biodiversity net gain?
Yeah, I think Ben's kind of hit the nail on the head there, really, on that one. I think we've got to again, it's, you know, business has been used for a force of good, not just bad, in many occasions. I think we've got to come together and stand up and be counted, and hold other businesses to account for the decisions that we make, but also, you know, push harder, shout louder about what is needed if we're gonna be able to turn the tide here. So yeah.
On that point, is it? I mean, I don't know how the mechanisms of it work, but would it be a case that industry bodies would go to the government and ask to bring in legislation, or do we wait from the top down for government to say you've got, you know, I'm not sure how it works, because I can imagine the industry bodies coming in and sort of setting standards. Is that, I don't know how it works. Is that possible?
I mean, for me, I think it's things like, you know, at ground control, we do try and influence legislation and what is put out there. So we're a member of the CBI, which is a political lobbying group. So we do try and influence what happens out there, and again, use that for a force for good. But I think that we've got a responsibility to push up and show and shout about what's required to make the meaningful changes. And that's, we're very heavily connected with Tony Juniper at Natural England. It's those kind of bodies as well, as a huge platform and a huge voice, tapping into that and saying, look, these are the key messages that you're talking about, and this is the kind of blockers and challenges and hurdles that we're seeing out there in the real world. How can you help get that message out there and use your influence to get that message against government as well?
I think that I think the experience at HS2, what's going on there, particularly in Jones Hill Wood now, has pretty much shown that Tony Juniper's a bit of a busted flush. He's in the pocket of government. He's not going to do anything. No chance. They wanted that project to go ahead, rightly or wrongly. I mean, whatever your thoughts on it are, but if you're relying on Tony Juniper, I think he's in the pocket of government. I don't think he's going to do a lot. I think at one time he was an effective campaigner, but not sure now.
Romy, how does the UK compare to Scandinavian countries? You know, what lessons can we learn from them?
It's interesting, actually, because I had a chat with our head of strategy last week thinking, oh, this is going to be a dreadful question, because it's going to be, yeah, you know, they're doing this in Norway, Sweden's so far ahead, you know, we're really lagging behind. And he completely surprised me by saying, actually, you seem to be bringing in more, you know, efforts to deal with this than we are, which completely surprised me. I'm not sure that's entirely true. I mean, they are very fortunate, for instance, in enjoying 100% renewable energy, as I said, and that's from hydropower dating back to the 1950s. So there are aspects where they're way ahead. But actually, he felt that some of the moves, like the biodiversity net gain, one is way ahead of where they are. I mean, that's lagging behind quite a lot. And even things like hydropower, which is a great thing, actually there's environmental damage, biodiversity damage caused by damming the rivers that create that power. So, you know, he said there's only really fairly recently more awareness around issues like that. So I don't know. I mean, I think they do far better in some ways. But I honestly think that if we had the will here, we would match them. Our green energy is increasing all the time. I mean, that's complex and difficult, but it is on the up. So, you know, I don't think we're as bad as we sometimes think to people looking externally. But I do think we have to set our own targets, you know, to be carbon neutral by whatever year. You know, selling more electric cars only by whatever year. You know, we're all sort of being dragged along with that. But I think we do need to look at things ourselves and try to be as strict ourselves as we can and set higher goals maybe that are more aspirational, because otherwise we're just, you know, moving along at snail's pace. So I think it is down to us. You know, there might be legislation, and I do think we do need more, but as we've just said, that's tricky to work out exactly what and how. But we have to self-police ourselves as individuals, as businesses, and as a sector, I think. And yeah, absolutely use all of the trade bodies and associations that we have to do that and start setting our own goals to really aspire to.
That's a really interesting point about having industry goals alongside the government's goals. Really interesting point. I'm aware we're kind of running out of time a little bit. So Ben, I just wanted to talk to you about your Barley Award-winning garden. You mentioned earlier, obviously, it topped the best use of recycled and reclaimed materials category. So I suppose, why do you think it topped that category, and what were the key sustainable alternatives that you used, just to kind of, I suppose, share those with the viewers?
Yeah. So I think it topped the category because it was a really sympathetic use of the space, and was driven by the client and the designer really wanting to work as harmoniously with the environment and also with the space as it was. And actually, off the back of that, and off the back of our environmental processes, it's made me start to think about this idea of a sustainable aesthetic, which is the kind of landscapes that, I mean, okay, if you think about the kind of stuff that's, and it ties in with the aspirational ideas that we've been discussing, you think about the kind of landscapes that have been promoted a lot over the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years or so. They don't sit, lots of them don't sit very well in our environment. You know, you've got kind of rendered walls, painted, very high maintenance, paved surfaces, lots of lighting, architectural type plants that are maybe suited to different climates. And the sustainable aesthetic is about really thinking about the types of materials that really that weather really well with the British climate, sit into the British climate, are good for the environment, porous surfaces, engage clients with that important connection to nature that, you know, very sterile surfaces don't, and particularly the children of those clients, those kids that are going to be playing in those gardens and making that all important connection to nature. So that garden, I think, displayed all the garden, the Barley Award-winning garden, displayed all those elements, I think. We used recycled materials in the main, and that was sub-based materials and surfacing materials, including fixtures and fittings and furniture. All the pots that were in the garden and any bricks, we reused them and repurposed them. And Ghislaine, the designer, Ghislaine Rickards, also she was very sympathetic to the existing site. You know, it was a woodland edge site. She didn't come in and want to overhaul that and turn it into, you know, Miami or something like that. You know, she understood what the site was. She understood that the client valued certain elements of that site, and she enhanced that and improved it. I'm thinking of so for me, the sustainable aesthetic would be something along the lines of if you think of, let's say we've got a retaining wall, right? And we build it out of concrete, core filled, steel into the foundations, deep concrete foundations that uses a lot of cement, and then we render it or we put a tile on it, and then we seal the back of it up, and you've got something that isn't really gonna, from experience, we've built loads of these things over the years, from experience, it doesn't weather very well. It can very quickly, within a few weeks, if it's painted render, start to look poor, and it doesn't weather well. It's expensive, and it's of no value to biodiversity. Whereas if you compare another type of retaining wall, which might be a gabion filled with reclaimed York stone or some stone of local provenance, that's a porous structure. It's cheaper to make, and plants can get in there, wildlife can get in there. You can go and actually engage with that, watch it change over the seasons. It's a totally different way of looking at the ways we can meet challenges in the landscape. So I thought it really drew that out for me, and I'm hoping that particular garden made people think slightly differently, and hopefully made them see that those types of gardens can be aspirational.
Did you say the client was driving that sustainability aspect as well?
No, the client was really open to that. So that's such an important thing. But Jelaine, the designer, had all the discussions. So she's also of that mindset. So she would have also, they were working together and feeding off one another to make it happen. It's difficult sometimes to, you've got, so when you go to client meetings, they will show you lots of images, and still today, that even with all the stuff that's in the headlines and all the problems that we've got that people are really aware of, we've still got people showing me these sort of really sterile spaces, artificial turf, rendered walls, hardly any plants, and when there are plants, they're kind of architectural, neatly clipped. There's no life in these gardens, and I think I'd like to see a shift more towards gardens that are less sterile, because everyone's aware. Everyone's aware. This is not. I'm not just coming from the point of view of my sort of passion, which is wildlife, but also it's really good for the mental health, physical health of that. And these gardens, think about a herbaceous border brimming with life. It's uplifting. So everyone's a winner, I think.
I know you've written a lot for us on convincing clients as well, and I'll share links to that on the Facebook chat when this is posted on there. I'm aware we've only got about 5 minutes left, so I just wanted to hear from everyone what you or your company is planning to do going forward, whether that's short term or long term. Starting with you, Romy.
I've posted earlier a link to the site for our new factory. That's probably taking all of our focus, in all honesty. It's supposed to be open this time next year, which I'm a little bit nervous about, but I'm being told that will happen. And we've Paris-proofed it, which means the commitment to minimise our emissions by 40% through the United Nations. We've taken on an enhanced, which is what I was talking about earlier, an enhanced target of 55%. So that factory will be using 90% less energy, water, everything compared to our current factory, which is actually very modern, only 6 years old, cutting edge. So all of our efforts, all of our finances, all of everything is going into the plus, so that we can really drive our impact down even further, which without that we can't. We've kind of reached a plateau where it's getting harder and harder. But that's our commitment for the next 10, 20 years of production, really, I guess.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Romy. Ben, did you want to take that one as well?
The most recent thing we've done is we've got a maintenance or garden management side to what we do, and we've just gone electric. So we're experimenting with that. Yeah, the fleet there has gone electric. So I don't know. I'm excited by that. hopefully. Darren, a lot of your stuff is electric, so I'm going to be really interested to see how that develops. So that's the big thing that's going on with us now. Yeah,
that's a big step, quite an exciting one, I think.
Yeah. See how we go.
Darren?
Yeah, I mean, as Ben says, it's, you know, we're working on a lot of electric mowers, auto mowers as well. We're looking at, again, turning our fleet to battery powered by 2030 across the whole fleet. We've got, you know, we're subscribed to the ISO 50001. We're pushing on with that. We're already carbon neutral as certified by the Carbon Trust, but we want to be carbon net zero by 2030. So again, leading the way there. Yeah, there's plenty going on, and above all of that, again, as I said earlier, our Evergreen Fund continue to invest and look for those opportunities where, you know, new companies emerging, not just in our sector, in any kind of sector, where they're trying to do something different, but they haven't got the capital that they need to get it off the ground, but it will ultimately have a positive impact on the environment. So look for those companies that are requiring fledgling capital to get off the ground. So yeah, there's a heavy itinerary there, and again, it just comes back to not just preaching this stuff, but showing that there is a way to do this as well, and hopefully modeling that for our customers and others that want to look on.
Thank you very much. It's really exciting to see how all of these things are going to develop over the next few months and years. And I hope everyone watching has been able to take away a few tips and tricks to become a little bit more sustainable as well. Just another reminder to tune in at 10 AM next Tuesday as well for Jim Wilkerson chatting to Howard Gray of Green Blue Urban. But just a very quick thank you to all those who are viewing, and to all of our panelists today. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
Nina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.